So this is analysis of ZvP, cross spawn on a very big map, and creating a strategy for denying the opponent a particular expansion rather than trying to kill them with a sequence of timings. So timing attacks are a really strong way to play StarCraft. It creates clear edges and gives you some opportunities to deal damage or just end the game. But if you're against a solid opponent who is playing safe and they're very far away from you, then timing attacks can potentially backfire and set you behind if they can defend with more workers and then push back. So my build order is the same as usual: 17 hatch, 18 gas, 17 pool, and then I'll take another hatch here. So my 20th drone is the one that is sent down here to check for cannon rushes, and then over here to take a third base. This overlord is scouting this spawn location in time for me to make the decision of whether I want to take my third here or take my third here. Generally, if you want to make as many drones as you can, you want to be expanding away from the opponent. Since it's cross spawn, these two bases are pretty much equidistant from the opponent. So I'm adjusting this overlord, flying to the left, and this overlord is flying kind of up. But if you think about how macro works in Legacy of the Void, especially at a GM level, denying the fifth base is probably the most reliable plan you can have. And sort of surprisingly, I guess, that's the same thing that Day 9 recommended for ZvT back in Heart of the Swarm. Because if Terran is making a bunch of units, they have a bunch of biomine, they can take their fourth base and make it a planetary. By the time they're trying to take their fifth base, you can have hive tech units. And you could say that's potentially the least exploitable way to play, where I'm not taking any risks, I'm making a bunch of early queens, I'm droning really hard, I'm taking my second gas when I have 2 base worker saturation, building my 4-minute spores. I saw this Stargate. So it's just really straightforward macro. And queens are a really good way of working towards that late game goal of map control by having vision, creep, and then figuring out fancy ways to deny the opponent their future expansions. So already here, we see one of Protos's tactics for delaying expansions and knowing when those expansions are going down with this stasis ward. They can put 1 stasis ward at each potential expansion. It doesn't kill a worker, but it does delay the timing of that base. This was a really important scout into the main, and I actually did this with my overlord that was just sent to the left at the beginning. It was sent to the left and then saw that there was no opponent here, so it flew up directly into the main. I didn't even put it here and then wait for a certain time. I just sent it straight up into the base. So this is a really important read because I can rule out Sky Toss as an option, which was definitely on the table when I saw this early Stargate. They could easily add on 2 more Stargates and then go for Sky Toss. But they didn't. They're going for ground. So I want to do my normal macro defense. I rally 3 roaches to each spore. This gives me some defensive buffer against DTs that are dropped into my base, Archons, Adepts that are shaded back and forth. And then since it's a really big map, and I think I know the opponent has a third. Yeah, I know that. So I'm going to go for a 4th base. I'm not even going to try and kill him with some timings. This opponent in particular, I feel is pretty strong for my level, so I kind of respect their ability to make a bunch of stuff and not die to some basic roach attack. So I just use these roach as kind of a stepping stone to not die to early harass, and then now I'm making better units. Hydras, lurkers. I went for a lurker den before getting Hydra range. That's more of the long-term goal. Hydra range upgrade would be something to get if you want to, say, time a single Evo upgrade and a bunch of Hydras and Lings against a Sky Toss opponent. That would be a pretty good build. But here I'm planning for the late game, and I want to deny the opponent's 5th base. So I see the 4th base here, but the Protoss has a pretty big army, and my army is very slow with lurkers, so I'm not really going to try and attack forward with lurkers into this space, especially against Storm and Immortals and a bunch of really strong units. I'm just going to bide my time and get into Hive Tech. So the next sequence of gas spending for Zerg is the Hive, and then a Spire. Typically you want to take it at the same time. I just messed it up a little bit. You take your Hive and your Spire, and then when your Spire is done, you make a Greater Spire immediately. Notice I have lots of Overlords around the map. I can see when bases are taken. Lurker is the unit to make if you want to just survive the big army engagements in the mid-game. Whether Protoss is going like Mass Stalker or Charge-Lot Archon Immortal, like in this case with Storm, or Colossi or whatever, Lurker just presents a really sturdy defensive option for Zerg. They're not great at moving forward and attacking because they're vulnerable and can't attack when they're uprooted and moving, but they're really good for just not dying and making it to Hive Tech. If you have a really high worker count, like I have more than 70, if you go up to 80 or so, you can just drop a few pieces of static defense. That buys you quite a bit of time against DT, Archon, Zealot, Warpins in the late game, whatever those happen to be. So I would say this is one of the most important moves I made this game. Because my plan revolves around denying the opponent a 5th base, I want to invest something that's pretty strong at that location. So it's not just a Ling that's burrowed, it's a Lurker. So they can't just send a Zealot and an Obs to go clear this, they need to represent detection and a few units to get rid of this. And then over here I have Overlord, and then I have a creep lane that's also making progress in that direction. Some people have called this Mutaflock like a snoot Mutaflock. He's pretty well known for making just a handful of mutas to survive against the Warp Prism pressure in the mid and late game. I have a mistake of attention here. I'm not actually noticing this because I was focusing on this army, which is the mark of a good player. A good player will kind of time 2 things at once, so they go for a big ground attack and they do a big warp in at the same time. So we'll just follow my vision and see what the crisis management looks like here. But I move my Lurkers to protect that base. My mutas are running home to defend the Zealots, and I'm making more mutas. So 8 more mutas just to clean this up a bit faster. I try to transfuse the Greater Spire. Ideally, I would have protected that Greater Spire better with those spines. Like, those 2 spines dealt a little damage to Zealots, but they could deny some surface area to the Zealots, and that would have been a lot better. So I'm making Hydras, since I can't make Broodlords or Corruptors. They're not quite as good of units, but they do well supporting Lurkers and the few Broodlords that I have. And because I don't want to die, I'm making a few more Lurkers. DT over here. Having Overlord speed in the mid and late game is really important. DTs are faster than Overseers without the Overlord speed upgrade. So if you like defending your bases, then invest in Overlord speed. I just have some queens with my army at this point. The opponent is clearing creep as they move forward aggressively, so it's important to re-establish that creep. I'm taking range attack +3, melee +2. I have some Banes in my composition now. Speed Banelings are counters to High Templar, just because of how fast they can fly in and deal their damage to a Protoss army. Baneling is also a very value-dense unit for its supply. It's half a supply and it's the cost of a Roach. For these engagements, it's really important to look at the mini-map and see how the globs of army are kind of moving around side to side. This Lurker is still doing work on the left side of the map. It hasn't been killed yet. The Tempests are kind of getting hits on my units. You could always nitpick the micro of these types of engagements a little bit. But the player who is ahead economically can afford to trade a little bit worse, just because they have more remax potential. And if you think about the main strength of Zerg as a race in StarCraft, it's not in the strength of their units, it's in their ability to remax and just keep producing more stuff faster than the opponent, and also change your tech as the engagements are happening. So now I'm taking a Spire upgrade, just making Broodlord Corruptor. Broodlord is sort of the ultimate anti-ground unit against Protoss. Ultras are terrible because of Immortals. Just how well Immortals trade with them, and Immortals are tier 2 units. So the opponent leveraged some Zealot defense at that base, so I'm just going to fly my Mutas in. Get him with some air units. And I'm making a round of Hydras here, so that I can morph more Broodlords. You want to have a pretty good balance of anti-ground and anti-air at all times, if the Protoss also has a balanced army. So it's a good kind of showcase of when both players make a good, sturdy, well-rounded army composition, they aren't really investing super heavily into any one unit. Look at the units tab. They have 8 Tempest, they had 7 Archons, 7 Immortals, 7 Zealots, a DT, 4 High Templar, and a Void Ray. So it's very diverse. And then I have 8 Broodlords, 9 Corruptors, 7 Lurkers, 2 Queens, some Mutas for defense, and then some Winged Hydra. Another benefit of trading kind of badly with the Protoss is starving them. So it costs them money to remax, and if I just killed their most crucial base and all the probes there, then they're going to be very strained to keep remaxing at the pace that I am. And I have a really big bank right now, so I can trade out this army and still make most of another one. So just chipping away. I see on the left that the Lurker has died now, so that's the base that they're going to take. This base up here, I have 2 Lurkers, so that's providing me vision of when this base is taken. And I know these upper bases can't be taken because I have those. So Mutas fly in, confirm that the base is indeed being taken. And kind of fly out whenever it's not good to attack anymore. Spine's getting some value killing DTs, so I remake some Spines. Even when you're going Broodlord, it's pretty important to keep some Lurkers in your composition, just so you don't have a situation where like Protoss blinks a bunch of Stalkers on top of your Broodlords and focuses them down. The Lurkers will just mow them. So here in production, I'm making a bunch of Lings. Zerglings are really good units to make whenever an engagement is happening, because they're produced so quickly and they move so fast that they can basically rejoin the fight before it's fully over. So that was my decision there. It's also important to get Adrenoglands. Adrenoglands was buffed in Legacy of the Void, and it's just a really good upgrade in general. Yeah, that was basically a ZvP where my goal was to deny the opponent's 5th base, and that was with Lurkers and Mutas primarily, and some Lingbane mixed in. And the army progression was Queen Roach to survive the early game, Hydra Lurker to survive the mid game, and then Broodlord Corruptor Lurker Queen Hydra in the late game.